now we are seeing two very interesting and intriguing perspective. Dr. Ayaz Ahmed talks about the identity, which is the factor, which is the factor, and it's the reason, one of the reason which has caused this situation. On the other hand, we have Professor Afroz Alam, who talks about, very in an interesting way, that how government and the relationship between the government and the people, the citizens of India, led to this situation. So we have two very different and very interesting, perspective on the same situation. I would like to have your opinion on this. How you see, both the opinions of both our guests and the current situation of India.
Well, and what I feel is that I totally agree with the fact that there has to be the basis for critical inquiry. A spirit of inquiry has to be inculcated in each and every person, every citizen. And citizenry in itself is a very egalitarian term. It's a very liberating identity, and it's a very advanced identity. But it's surely so that we are very, very far off from being citizens, and because it entails so much of mental advancement and educational advancement, and your interrogation and argumentativeness with the state, and being able to bend and pull the government, if at all it digresses from its main goal, to bring it down and to the level of the citizen. The government itself has to be, and the people who are sitting in the government also themselves have to consider themselves as being citizens, and they have to be equal. So yes, that it goes without saying that these are the primary requisites of the democracy. And citizenry is not only, it's a double thing. It's a gift in a way, that it not only enshrines us as a very vibrant, non-robotic model of a person within the nation state, but it also enshrines us with the rights. So it's a dual thing, and it's a very advanced thing. And nation states, they and people, long struggles, they have struggled to acquire this state for their people. So that is one thing. But it's also interesting that we have a long tradition within our country. Let me quote this example. When I was about 4-5 years before, maybe a little before that, I was reading the book by Mr. Amartya Sen. At that point in time, I guess it must have been a decade back, and I used to consider him as a major intellectual person, and I was happy that I have somehow gotten hold of his book, The Argumentative Indian, and one more book he had written. And to my utter dismay, I did not see any mention of the biggest reality of this country, that is caste. I mean, how can a person write an entire book? What Mr. Ayaz Ahmed was alluding to, that you have a argumentative tradition. You have nomenclature it as an argumentative tradition, but you have not identified who these people are. Were they coming from the same oppressor class? Were they the same people who were forming the Hindu Mahasabha, or were they the people who were the argumentative people, who were challenging the notions of communalism and casteism and Brahmanism, all the oppression modalities of oppression? So this was never there. What I mean to say is that it was amalgamated and shown as if a confusion was created, that the agency which was oppressing and which is very active today is again mixed up with the people who are the sufferers of that particular agency. Now this leads to a very confusing thing, and what Professor Afroz Alam was alluding to, the lack of cynicism, the lack of spirit of inquiry, is because of this. And this stream of consciousness was never given the kind of attention. It was never brought into either the syllabus of this country, neither the main discourse, and neither in the academic discourse, wherever. It was simply relegated to the background. If at all today we hear the intellectual things of all these subaltern class, and who have come with long struggles. That is because of grassroots movements and people who have individually in pockets have tried to via pamphlets, via small meetings, small street plays, and like Namashudra community during their times of it was very interesting that at the times of funerals and whenever there was to be death in the family, they used to get together and have discussions to challenge Bengal, the Brahminism which was happening in Bengal. So, these were the unorganized but small but very consistent efforts over 2 or 3 centuries which took roots, and it was totally set aside. It was never. So where is that argumentativeness and where is that questioning going to come from? It's not going to come from the oppressive communities' discourse. It is not going to come from that narrative. And rightly, that is how it has been. I mean, I don't know how to reiterate. It is what all things have found place in our syllabus. You go to France, you go to any other country, whether Rousseau has been agreeing with the current French government or not, Rousseau is being taught, Voltaire is being taught, many more other people are being taught. Is Mahatma Phule being taught the way he has to be taught? No, he's not. Do we know about who Ayodhya Das is? Do we understand what Periyar said about women rights? I mean, there's a whole, whether Congress people, so-called liberal, or these so-called national heroes, they have come from the same popular leading nationalistic class. And it is the ideas that have been this thing, and they have only taught us to accommodate, not to question, and to adhere to the national heroism, or to deifying the people whom they were. Today Mr. Modi is being deified sometimes as Krishna, sometimes as whatever, and if Priyanka Gandhi is sometimes shown as Durga Devi and all. This is exactly what it is. That is how it is. So this is the main problem. Second problem has been the discourse has been totally dominated by the same class, whether the liberal out of them or the so-called orthodox. Another very interesting thing, like just about the other day, I was listening to the talk of Mrs. Gandhi. Now, as a doctor, I have always known, and we must be aware that they're all. I mean, like, people talk about population, and people talk about, if we have a huge population and we have scarce resources, that's a very simplistic way of understanding a nation, understanding a country, and the issues of the people. I mean, it's probably the 4th grade or 5th grade understanding that the resources are this much, and the country is the population is this much, and therefore there's scarcity. And this is exactly what I heard Mrs. Gandhi, speaking. That she was adhering to the understanding that it's such a huge country and so many huge people, and Garibi is our main problem, and population control is very important. And there were issues which were she was being questioned by the journalists regarding the enforcement of population control measures, and everything for almost 3-4 decades, as far as Congress rule was concerned. As today it is being in and around Hindu-Muslim or rationalism and communalism and religious nationalism. At the time of Congress, it was that they are trying to take out the Garibi out, but the population problem is such. And this is where then I feel that the spirit of inquiry and the educative element comes. As she nationalized the banks, she should have nationalized the education as well, or the governments, not only she, the entire governments, they should have nationalized the governments, the education as well. It did not happen. For example, she attributed, or the entire intellectual class at that time, until today, they have attributed that population explosion occurs because people are just, religiously, or whether they are Hindus, if they are there, then from the lower caste who are going into population explosion, and a Muslim to badate hai, they are known for increasing their population. But none of them had that sincerity, or none of them had the intellectual capacity, I would say, because why would I exploit the intellectual capacity and point out at the intellectual capacity of this ruling class, because they were the people who were dominating all the spaces. They were in the academia, they were in the Prasar Bharati, they were in the media, they were in the international information and broadcasting ministry. They were dominating each and every narrative and each and every understanding. And we now, and we have always known that if population explosion has to be controlled, you don't have to put a damning measure like vasectomy or a pressurizing measure, but you just have to increase your funding of education in that country, because the educational capability or the educational level of that particular person or that family is inversely proportional to the number of children which are produced in that family. I mean, this is the most simplistic thing. It was not given the mainstream idea, and it was exploited. And that is how the victims of this country, the victim of oppression, the people, SC, ST, OBCs, the backward classes, were made to feel, they were made to feel responsible for their own predicament, for their own destiny, which was being forced upon them by these people who were ruling the state and the various institutions. Same with the so-called Muslim community, and the same so-called with the other communities which were mocked at, which were pointed out that these people were responsible for the malady that the country is facing. So this is how it is. Now, thirdly, coming to when you talk about the future, of course, I don't have to again re-emphasize what has been already spoken about by my co-panelists. But let me tell you that if at all a country, the India and its intellectual class, hereby I mean again the upper caste, upper class, and also the intellectual class which is emerging out of the Bahujan class. These people will have to, and especially the responsibility remains with the upper caste, upper class, intellectual class, so-called. I do not call them intellectuals because in no way has their intellectualism ever helped country. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been in this state as of now. Rather, is the lack of intellectualism, and most of their energy has gone into keeping the privileges intact. And trying to keep the privileges intact, and that has been the major unfortunate thing that the country has faced. So, nevertheless, these people, the so-called liberals or whatever, unless and until they become ready to divest themselves of their privileges, they will have to take that step. Unless and until they are able to do that, if they do not show that courage, or if they just go by empty slogans, and if they go by only the adage of secularism, it's not going to help at all. I mean, absolutely, it is empty slogans, as the empty slogans of Mr. Modi or the BJP government. It's not. And tremendously and very importantly, time and again, we have seen that whenever it comes to that level, that the structure is being totally, shaken from the foundation. It is the liberal so-called upper caste, upper class, which comes to the rescue of the orthodox class. Whether we have taken the example of JNU, the roster system, whenever the situation of representation of the unrepresented people and the overrepresentation of the overrepresented people, it is not being questioned, nothing is going to change in this country. They will have to show that courage in divesting themselves. Again, I would say, lastly but not the least, the religiosity which is brought into picture. Enough has been said, and we so-called people as many times the BJP keeps on saying Hindu Muslim, and today in the Republic Day parade we saw that one of the tableau was of the Ram Mandir. Okay, and they had that. So where is secularism over here? And this kind of a thing is going to enhance the reaction and going to keep the discourse in the Hindu Muslim or Hindu Punjabi or Hindu Sikh or Hindu Christian, and so on and so forth. I mean, there will be a reaction to this, and I'm sure there must have been so many people who are not from the BJP or the RSS, but still are from the so-called liberal in the bureaucracy and so many organs of the state. But did they question that? Did they ever have that coverage to, and how the media is going to cover it and how they're going to showcase it? We have seen that the so-called communist class, the antidote to Hindu Muslim for them has to be, instead of Jai Shri Ram, Jai Siya Ram. This is the capability of these people. That is the capacity. That is the thing that they have. That is their antidote. I mean, this will be an indication to the level of what they want to do with this country. So the people who really want to bring about a change, they will have to forget about laying their trust in these people. laying the agency of change in these people, having a broad class unity, of course, that goes without saying, but the religious phenomenon, now that the incidences of attacks, whether lynchings or various kind of sedation cases and very horrendous incarcerations of Muslims and Christians and Bahujans is taking place, and more so of the Muslims is taking place in the country, it's natural that Islamophobia or anti-Muslim feeling will be seen. That is exactly what the government wants to bring in. This is exactly this discourse that it wants to set in. Up till now, because the stakes are so high for the government, the stakes of the privileged class is so high, so much attached it is for its own privileges, and it doesn't want to give away and throw away its traditional dominance, that they have come to the level of killing, and they would go on to a certain extent and doing more and more atrocities, only so that the entire non-Muslim class will get polarized. And this is exactly what Mr. Gramsci and other people have very well explained this phenomenon, how the reactionary things take into place. As regards now today, when I talk about religiosity, let me say two things and then I'll finish my my expression. The dangers. When it comes to religion, without going into the intricacies of each and every religion, let me, without any hindrance, say that most of the religions have been anti-women. When it comes to religion, they are not only anti-women. I mean, automatically it comes to that. It's okay that religions have reformative movements within themselves. It's okay. That's a process which has to continue going on. Every country, whether Malaysia, whether any of the Buddhist countries and every other country, none of the countries, despite having their own main religion, none of them are uniform. They have modified their religion according to the nuances, according to the requirements of the people, and according to the requirements of the modern egalitarian age. They cannot be and they should not be. And this movement, within religion movement, reformative movement, have to go on. If that particular religion allows it, that is something which is a good thing. If it doesn't allow, then the people have to dabble with it. That's besides the point. But uniformly, if we bring it into the main discourse, then religiosity, today when the farmers' protest is going on, for example, there's a huge body of people who would want to go ahead with a Sikhism fervor. Sikhism, it does talk about egalitarianism. It talks about women power. It talks about many more things. But again, I find it problematic because there has a totally the base of which you're going to attach yourself on. Are you going to be attaching yourself to what the Sikh Guru said about 400, 500 years ago, even after the entire period of your history has gone in your own struggles and your own understanding, whether it is Indian or Western? Are you going to do that? Or are you going to develop and bring in more renaissance and more enlightened thoughts and modern structures of egalitarianism within your discourse and within your understanding? That is the moot question. It's okay for me if Sundari Devi has gone on the horse and taken cudgels, which is way advanced than what Hindu women have ever done in their entire 2000 years of history. But that's again not enough because religiosity and religious nationalism is a threat to democracy in its own respect, and at any cost it should not come. So if nation states are built around, whether it is Khalistan or any other stan, and if it has a religious identity as the basis, then it is the debacle, because not only it is about something specific to the Indian subcontinent, that it submerges the total questions of the subaltern classes, which each and every religion has done. We have seen so much of submersion has occurred in Sikhism as well. So the people within the religions have to realize, and they have to desist from bringing that in the forefront, whether it is Islamophobia or Sikhophobia or Christianophobia. We will all have to find out a ways and means out of the purview of the religious identity. And that, if it happens, because that is not only good for the own religious advancement, but that is the only way I feel is we can counter the Hindu majoritarianism and Hindu religiosity and Hindu fundamentalism, which is the dominant type of fundamentalism in our country.
Right. We got like a very third interesting perspective on the same situation. This conversation has been like really intense, but interesting. And what Dr. Manisha Bangar has said is like the ignorance of a community which has been dominating on all our institutions. That has very much to do to the current state we are in. So, and we are, as of now, we are exceeding our scheduled time. But before closing the session, I'll quickly like to have a final comment on the solutions. You talk about the problems, you talk about the state which we are in. What are the solutions you propose? Again, I'll go with Professor Afroz Alam, sir.
My point lies in we need to produce more and more cynical citizens who is capable to question the privileges, the operations, the dominations, and that will take place only and only when we amongst ourselves are able to produce a class of people who are more trained in producing their own kind of literature, their own kind of paintings, their own kind of arts, their own kind of the writings. If we are not able to do that, the solution does not lie anywhere. So we need to have certain people, class of people which are having a democratic character, and I don't see a solution. We need to produce more cynical citizens, capable citizens, conscious citizens who can understand the languages of the power, the languages of the privileges, and only then we can think of some secure future.
Uh, Dr. Ayaz Ahmad, what do you say?
Yeah, I'll totally agree with Professor Afroz Alam on this point that we do need a group of intellectuals who can invest in the construction of a democratic popular identity through cultural interventions, artistic, literary interventions. We do need a group of intellectuals who can pitch themselves beyond the hostile, communal, popular political identities and invest in democratic identities with the help of production or reproduction of democratic citizenry. And it is very important, as Professor Afroz Alam has also pointed out, that for them to carry a sense of skepticism. It is very important. But at the same time, it is also very important for us to carry, for this set of intellectuals and social leaders, activists, to also carry optimism that what has been built can be destroyed. And if a negative popular identity, hostile popular identity has been built, then it can be destroyed. And a positive democratic popular identity can also be built. There is hope. There is optimism. It doesn't matter that at present we see that there is one hostile, anti-democratic popular identity which is dominating the scene. This dominance will not remain forever. If we can build a counter popular democratic identity, invest in it with the help of art, literature, culture, social, economic, political practices, then we can replace anti-democratic forces and place democratic popular identities at the center, at the helm of affairs, whether it is government, society, bureaucracy, academia, wherever. That investment is very, very important. But first of all, we have to develop a sense of skepticism, I agree there, but then also carry how we move forward with a sense of optimism that we may be we may be resourceless at the moment, we may be at the margins, we may be some small voice here or there, but this voice has got ethical, normative force behind it. It has got democratic content in it. It can democratize entire subcontinental society and produce democratic politics. which will be more egalitarian, which will be based on liberty, equality, and fraternity. So hope and optimism as well for next 10 years, or for from here onward, for the republic, along with the sense of skepticism in the ability of the government or in the ability of the state to solve all our problems. That the skepticism is important. Skepticism against dominant political identities is very, very important. We need to question, interrogate them, but at the same time also build optimistically democratic, popular identities which can participate in power struggle and place democratic values at the center, rather than communal or casteist or fascist kind of values. We need to place democratic values which are enshrined in the constitution at the center. Thank you, Environment.
Dr. Manisha Bangar, what do you say?
Yeah, I would say the second thing first, and that for me is that all the subalterns and people who are out of the power structure, they need to be in all the institutions of structure which has been the tool of the governing class, in the way that it is through those structural institutions they are able to exercise their dominance and exercise their oppression. So whether it is media, whether it is judiciary, whether it is, of course, I mean, this is something which comes in the purview of representation. Somehow what I feel is that whether it is the Sikh community or the other communities, especially the Muslim community, for them, representation institutions is not the something which is in the main discourse or in the forefront. And this has to be instituted, because if they have their own police force over there, they have their own Numainde over there, naturally things will not be the way they are for them today. If they have their own judges, if they have their own people in the media, but somehow the discourse and the discussion is somewhere in and around atrocities and in and around communalism. So there has to be a shift across identities, across communities. This is what I feel. And how we take those places, how the excluded class goes up and takes that up, that's to be seen, because the one who has occupied those spaces is not going to so easily give them up. So that calls for people's struggle and people's commitment and people's mobilization and everything that we all know. That is one thing. Second thing is, of course, it comes in the cultural and the religious domain, or maybe I would say political cultural domain. Now, for example, today when the BJP goes to Bengal, and BJP goes with the symbolism, religious symbolism, it exploits all its symbolism. And what do the people of Bengal, even if they are majoritarily have been non-religious, or rather, at the fringe communist, rationalist kind of a people, what do they have to offer? They have to offer what is Durga Mata, or something which is within the religious realm. But they do not have anything to offer which goes beyond that, which has questioned the operation in totality. So we do have the liberals today who are questioning the resistance of the resisting people today. Today, the farmers are being questioned for their resistance. But none of the liberals or upper caste people or the people who are effecting change, intellectuals, academicians, they are not questioning the oppression the way they should have. And to question the operation, they need to know how the operation was exercised. So taking, for example, today people like you and me, for us and the people of Bengal, it is important to know what the Namachudra community did there, what Mr. Mandal did there, how did they take it out, and taking those educative, rationalistic symbols, can they thwart out the advancement of the religious fundamentalism which is encroaching on them? Whether you talk about Kerala or Karnataka, you talk about, you take Baswanna over there, you take Akka Mahadevi in Karnataka, none of these symbols, none of their discourse, none of their resistances are being brought to the forefront. Same with Punjab. Same with the Muslim community. So this has to change. And from here, there can be a unity. This has already formed a basis for unity among people. These have been movements where people have actually fought against the religious fundamentalism and nationalism and all kind of caste communal oppression, and this base could be a base for cultural revival and nation building processes as well as political mobilization. This is what I feel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This conversation has been like really, really, really interesting, and we came up with very diverse. I can say like very diverse, and observation which are to the like on a different tangent, and 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 we cannot say that this one is wrong and this one is like more right and this one is less. But what we have, what we all agree that what we are witnessing is something critical and something which needs uh, a debate which is uh, beyond just beyond accusing the other side. We need more sensible debates. We need more debates which can dig into the root cause, which can address the real issues, and we can then come up with the solutions. So this conversation has been, we the National India News tried to bring that notion of debate, that we debate, we discuss to dig deeper into the root cause, and we come up with perspective and the possible solutions. So what Dr. Manisha Bangar has said is she talked about the overrepresentation of particular community and the ignorance of what we call so-called liberal and the so-called intellectuals. What Professor Afroz Alam brings us is very much interesting. And he talks about the relationship between the government and the citizens, and the power citizens has given to the government, and the submissive attitude towards whatever government is offering, and to the very and to a very different point, Dr. Ayaz Ahmed offers us a perspective where he gives us the reasons that the identity, the religion, and the overemphasis of these factors has led us to this situation. And all of I mean, all three of you have proved your point. You gave the situation that but we all agree that this situation is like really critical, but the perspectives are different, the observations are different, and I personally feel we really need more these kind of debates where we can agree to disagree and to understand more about the current situations. And I really want to thank all of you and all our viewers for watching National India News today. This is me, Anwarul Hoda, and I will be ending this conversation for tonight. Thank you so much for watching National India News.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
ये वीडियो अगर आपको पसंद आया हो तो इसे लाइक करें, कमेंट करें, शेयर करें और हाँ, हमारे चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करना ना भूलें ताकि देश विदेश से जुड़ी खबरें आप मिस ना करें, क्योंकि कोरोना काल में 2 गज दूरी, मास्क है जरूरी। नमस्कार।